If you love stories filled with forbidden romance, betrayal, and secrets that cut deep, make sure to like, comment, and share your thoughts at the end of this story. Your reactions inspire the next tales we tell. The Charleston night was thick with heat and regret. Rain had just washed over the city, leaving the cobblestone streets slick and gleaming under the amber street lights. The air smelled of salt and magnolia, sweet, heavy, and intoxicating. Elena Monroe stepped out of the black Escalade, her heels clicking against the stone like a countdown she couldn't stop. Her reflection shimmered in the rain puddles, a woman in her early 30s, beautiful but visibly burdened. The kind of beauty that made men lose their composure and women sense danger. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not at Ethan Pierce's house. Ethan had returned to Charleston 6 months ago, a 34-year-old architect with a quiet kind of brilliance and a habit of overthinking everything. After 10 years away, he'd come home seeking peace. What he found instead was her. When he opened his door that night and saw Elena standing there, dripping rain and remorse, his breath stalled. "Elena," he said, voice low. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," she whispered, clutching her purse. "But I had to see you." Her tone carried the kind of tremor that came only from guilt or longing. He stepped aside reluctantly, and she entered, a ghost from a past he'd tried to bury. The scent of her perfume lingered in the air, filling the quiet house with temptation. Ethan's chest tightened. She'd once been his everything, the stranger he met one rainy night at a highway diner off I-26, when he'd been too tired to drive and too lonely to care. He'd helped her fix a flat tire, bought her coffee, and stayed to talk until sunrise. She'd called herself Nora. He never knew her real name, not until months later, when she appeared in the local paper, standing beside his father in a wedding photograph. Elena Monroe Pierce. His father's new wife. Elena's heels echoed softly on the hardwood floor as she turned to face him. Her eyes glistened under the dim light. "I shouldn't have come," she said, voice trembling. "Then why did you?" Ethan asked, crossing his arms. "Because I can't pretend anymore," she said. "Every family dinner, every charity event, I feel like I'm suffocating. You sit there across the table, pretending not to see me, and I can't breathe." He exhaled sharply, turning away. "Elena, this, whatever this is, has to stop. You're married to my father." She flinched. "Do you think I don't know that?" "But I didn't marry him out of love, Ethan. I was cornered." Her voice cracked on the last word, and for the first time, Ethan noticed her shaking hands. "Cornered?" he asked, his tone softening despite himself. She swallowed. "Your father, he made promises. He helped my family when no one else would. My mother was sick. I thought I was saving her. But when the dust settled, I realized I'd sold myself into something worse than debt." Ethan stared at her, the woman he'd once kissed under a rain-soaked sky, now tangled in the power of the man who'd raised him. "Elena," he said quietly, "you could have told me." "I tried," she whispered. "But by the time I wanted to, it was too late. You'd already left town, and your father." Her voice broke off. The air between them thickened. He stepped closer, his anger warring with something else, something that had never really died. "Elena, this isn't fair," he murmured. "You can't come here, say all this, and expect me to just." She moved closer. "Expect you to what? Forget me?" He froze. Her perfume, her nearness, her trembling breath, it all hit him at once. "Tell me you don't still think about that night," she said. He wanted to lie. He couldn't. The clock ticked loudly in the silence. Outside, thunder rumbled across the harbor. She reached for him then, not with desperation, but with a tenderness that shattered his restraint. Her fingertips brushed his wrist, and he felt the memory of her, every touch, every whispered word, come rushing back. "Ethan," she said softly, "you make me remember what being alive feels like." He closed his eyes. "You're my father's wife, Elena. I'm your mistake that never went away," she breathed. His jaw tightened. He should have walked away. He didn't. The air felt electric, charged with danger and desire. They stood there, inches apart, until lightning flashed through the window, breaking the spell. Ethan turned away. "You should go." "I can't," she said quietly. "Not yet. There's something you need to know." He faced her again, wary. "What do you mean?" Elena's expression changed, fear creeping into her eyes. "Your father's not the man you think he is. There's something he's been hiding. Something about you." His pulse quickened. "What are you talking about?" She hesitated. "I can't explain here. It's not safe. But if anything happens to me, promise me you'll check behind the portrait in his study, the one of your mother. That's where you'll find the truth." "Elena." Before he could press further, her phone buzzed. She looked down, the name Richard Pierce glowing on the screen. Her breath hitched. "He knows I'm here." "Elena, don't." But she was already moving toward the door, panic flickering across her face. She paused at the threshold, looking back at him, eyes wet, lips trembling. "Whatever happens next," she whispered, "remember this, I loved you first." And then she was gone. Ethan stood alone, the storm outside roaring louder than the one inside his chest. He looked toward the fireplace, where the photograph of his late mother hung above the mantel, smiling, peaceful, eternal. Behind that portrait, Elena had said, lay a truth about him. He didn't know it yet, but that truth would unravel everything, his family, his name, and the line between love and betrayal. Charleston mornings had a way of pretending nothing ever went wrong. The sun painted the old mansions gold, the Spanish moss swayed lazily from the oaks, and the harbor breeze smelled of salt and serenity, a cruel disguise for the chaos Ethan Pierce felt inside. He hadn't slept. Elena's words echoed in his head like a broken record. "There's something about you. Look behind the portrait." He stared at the framed photograph of his mother above the fireplace. It had hung there for 20 years, untouched, her smile forever frozen in perfect grace. She'd died when he was 14, or at least, that's what his father had always said. But last night, when Elena left, everything shifted. Ethan poured himself black coffee, the bitterness matching his thoughts. The morning news mumbled in the background, another real estate deal, another mention of Richard Pierce, Charleston's empire builder. His father's face filled the screen, charming, powerful, immaculate in his tailored suit. Ethan muted the TV. He'd spent his whole life trying not to become that man. By noon, the house felt too quiet, too heavy. He finally gave in. He climbed the stairs to his father's estate on Rutledge Avenue, a sprawling southern mansion with columns that whispered history and secrets. The Pierce legacy had been built here, and maybe buried here, too. The butler, Harlan, greeted him with the same polite stiffness as always. "Good afternoon, Mr. Ethan." "Mr. Pierce is out at the club, but Mrs. Pierce." Ethan cut him off. "That's fine, Harlan. I just came to look for something in the study." The old man hesitated, then nodded. "Of course, sir." The doors unlocked. Ethan moved down the hallway, his heartbeat steady but heavy. Every portrait, every chandelier, every polished surface whispered of money and control. He could almost smell his father's presence, cologne, bourbon, and dominance. He opened the study door. The room was exactly as he remembered, dark wood, leather chairs, and the faint trace of cigar smoke. But the portrait above the mantel drew him in instantly. His mother, Caroline Pierce, with soft curls and kind eyes, painted in her favorite blue dress. He stood there a long time before finally reaching up and unhooking it. The frame was heavier than he expected. Behind it, the wall looked ordinary, except for a faint outline of a small wooden panel. Ethan's pulse spiked. He ran his fingers along the edges until he found a latch. With a soft click, the panel opened. Inside was a narrow metal box, locked. He stared at it, heart pounding. Then he remembered the drawer in his father's desk, always locked, but easily picked. 10 minutes later, the box was open. Inside lay a stack of old documents, hospital files, photographs, and a letter sealed in faded paper. Ethan lifted the top file carefully, eye scanning the heading. Charleston Memorial Hospital, Neonatal Record, 1990. His stomach twisted. That was his birth year. He flipped it open. His name, Ethan Monroe. Not Ethan Pierce. He froze. It wasn't a typo. It wasn't a coincidence. Monroe. The same last name as Elena. The world tilted. He sat down, the papers shaking in his hands. There was more: medical notes, signatures, a DNA test dated years ago. The signature at the bottom read Richard Pierce. The results were clear. Probability of paternity, 0%. His chest tightened until he could barely breathe. He wasn't Richard Pierce's son. The man he'd spent his life hating wasn't his father at all. He flipped through the documents again, desperate for answers. At the bottom of the stack, a photograph slipped out, a young woman holding a baby wrapped in a hospital blanket. Her face was partly turned away, but the resemblance was undeniable. It was Elena Monroe's mother. And the baby, him. A sound behind him broke the silence. He turned sharply, and froze. Elena stood in the doorway. Her expression was pale, fragile, her eyes glossy from tears. "You found it," she whispered. He stood, anger and disbelief colliding in his veins. "What the hell is this, Elena? What did you mean by something about me? What is all this?" She stepped inside slowly. "I tried to warn you." "Warn me? You could have told me." She shook her head, voice trembling. "I couldn't. Richard has people everywhere. He doesn't forgive betrayal, not even blood." Ethan laughed bitterly. "Blood? That man doesn't have any blood, just money and pride." Her voice softened. "Ethan, he's not your father." He clenched his fists. "I figured that much out. But there's more," she said, stepping closer. "You and I, we share something deeper." His jaw locked. "What are you saying?" She swallowed hard. "My mother, Julia Monroe, had an affair with Richard Pierce years before I was born. She was his secretary then. He promised her everything. But when she got pregnant, he abandoned her and paid her off to disappear. My mother raised me alone. She told me he was dead." Ethan stared at her, his mind spinning. "Wait, are you saying?" "Yes." Her voice cracked. "Richard Pierce is my father too." The silence that followed was absolute. Thunder rumbled again in the distance, as if the city itself recoiled. Ethan staggered back, his heart pounding. "No. That's impossible." "Elena," her voice broke. "We didn't know. Neither of us knew." He turned away, shaking his head. "You married him. You married your father, Elena." She gasped, covering her mouth. "No, oh my God." The room seemed to collapse inward, walls, air, reason. Ethan felt sick. Everything he'd ever known, his name, his family, his love, was tangled in lies. "Elena," he said finally, his voice rough. "We have to tell someone. The police, the press, something." She shook her head, tears streaming down. "You don't understand. Richard will destroy us before he lets this get out. You have no idea what he's capable of." Ethan's voice hardened. "Then maybe it's time someone found out." She reached for his hand, desperate. "Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't confront him alone." He met her eyes, broken, beautiful, terrified, and for a fleeting moment, he still felt it, that dangerous spark that had started everything. But now, it burned with horror. "Get out of here," he said quietly. "Before he finds out you told me." She hesitated. "Ethan." "Go, Elena." She nodded slowly, tears blurring her vision, and turned to leave. As the door closed, Ethan looked down at the photo still lying on the floor, a baby in his mother's arms, the same eyes, the same fate. The truth was out. But the damage had only begun. The Charleston sky was bruised with storm clouds again, as if the city could sense what was about to break. Ethan drove aimlessly down Meeting Street, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, the files from his father's study scattered on the passenger seat. Every stoplight seemed to mock him. Every flash of lightning reminded him that his entire life had been built on a lie. He wasn't a Pierce. Elena was his half-sister. And the man he'd called his father had lied to them both. He pulled over by the Battery, stepped out, and let the salt wind slap his face. The waves crashed against the stone wall, dark and violent. He'd always come here when he needed clarity, but tonight the water held no answers, only reflection, the kind that hurt. Behind him, a familiar voice called out. "Ethan." He turned. Detective Sarah Larkin, a longtime family friend, was walking toward him in a raincoat, holding a folder. "You're hard to track down these days," she said. "I heard you've been asking questions about your father." Ethan's chest tightened. "What do you know?" She sighed. "More than I want to. Richard Pierce made enemies on every corner of the city. Real estate, politics, even a few campaign donations that don't look clean." "But why the sudden interest?" He hesitated, then handed her one of the hospital records. "Because I'm not his son." Her eyes widened. "What?" He told her everything, the portrait, the box, Elena, the DNA test. When he finished, Sarah was silent for a long time. "Ethan," she said finally, "if what you're saying is true, you're sitting on dynamite. Richard Pierce doesn't just hide secrets, he buries them. And people who dig too deep don't always resurface." "Then help me prove it," he said. "Help me end this." Sarah nodded slowly. "All right. But we do it quietly. No headlines. No confrontations. Not yet." That night, Ethan couldn't shake the image of Elena's face when she learned the truth. He tried calling her, no answer. By midnight, he was pacing his apartment, every ring of his phone a phantom. Then finally, it buzzed. "Unknown number." He answered. "Elena?" Her whisper trembled through the line. "Ethan. I think he knows." "Where are you?" "I'm at the lake house." He showed up out of nowhere. He's different, cold, furious. He said he wanted to talk, but I'm scared. "Please." The line went dead. Ethan's heart dropped. He grabbed his keys and bolted for the door. The drive to Lake Marion felt endless. Thunder rolled overhead, rain streaking across his windshield. When he reached the Pierce family lake house, every light was on, glowing through the rain like warning signals. He ran up the steps, pushed open the door, and froze. The living room was a mess. A glass had shattered across the floor. And Richard Pierce stood near the fireplace, face shadowed, a tumbler of bourbon in his hand. "Evening, son," Richard said evenly. "Or should I say, Mr. Monroe?" Ethan's throat tightened. "Where is she?" Richard smiled faintly. "You always had her eyes. I should have known the moment I saw you two together." "Where is Elena?" Ethan repeated, voice sharp. Richard tilted his glass, unbothered. "She's upstairs. We had a disagreement." Ethan started toward the stairs, but Richard's voice stopped him. "You really think you can destroy me with a few papers and a scandal?" His tone turned venomous. "Everything you are, the schools, the car, the company, I built that life for you. And you'd throw it away for her?" Ethan turned slowly. "You built a lie, Richard. You made her your wife. You made me your son. And you didn't tell either of us the truth." Richard's face hardened. "Truth is overrated. Legacy, on the other hand, that's what survives." "Not this one," Ethan said. Richard's jaw flexed. "If you walk up those stairs, there's no going back." Ethan met his gaze. "I didn't come here to go back." He found Elena in the master bedroom, sitting by the window in her nightgown, her eyes red and swollen. The rain lashed against the glass, but she didn't move. "He told you," she whispered when she saw him. He nodded. "I know everything." Tears slid down her cheeks. "I can't undo what happened. I wish I could." He knelt beside her. "You didn't know, Elena." "Neither of us did." She looked at him then, a look so full of love and pain it almost broke him. "What do we do now?" Before he could answer, the door downstairs slammed. Richard's voice echoed up the stairs, furious now. Ethan grabbed her hand. "We run." They bolted through the rain, Ethan pulling Elena toward his car. Behind them, the house glowed like a lantern ready to burn out. They reached the car, and then a gunshot shattered the night. Elena gasped, clutching her arm. "Go," she screamed. "Just drive." He floored it, tires spinning on wet gravel, the rain swallowing their trail as they tore down the dark road. Neither of them spoke for miles. The only sounds were her shallow breaths and the pounding of his heart. Finally, she said softly, "He'll never stop, Ethan." "I know." When they reached the city, Ethan pulled into an old warehouse by the harbor, one of his unfinished projects. He helped her out of the car, wrapped her arm in a torn piece of his shirt, and sat her down. She tried to smile through the pain. "You shouldn't have come." He brushed a strand of wet hair from her face. "You called. I'll always come." The moment hung between them, too fragile and too dangerous. "I don't know if what we had was love or illusion," she whispered, "but it was real to me." He looked into her tear-streaked eyes. "It was real to me too." Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance, or maybe it was the storm. Dawn crept over Charleston like a confession no one wanted to hear. Detective Larkin stood beside the edge of the pier, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the sunrise. She'd just received a call: Richard Pierce found dead in his lake house, single gunshot wound to the chest. No suspects. No witnesses. The story would make headlines within hours. She turned when she heard footsteps behind her. Ethan stood there, pale, exhausted, still wearing the same soaked clothes. "You heard," she said quietly. He nodded. "Where's Elena?" He hesitated. "She's gone." "Gone where?" "I don't know," he lied. Sarah studied him for a long moment. "You didn't kill him, did you?" Ethan shook his head. "No. But I wish I knew who did." She sighed. The coroner found 2 sets of footprints outside the house. One his. One smaller. "If Elena comes back, tell her she needs to talk to me." He nodded, but his gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the sun touched the water, lighting it gold. Sarah put a hand on his shoulder. "Be careful, Ethan. Secrets like this, they don't die with the man who kept them." Hours later, Ethan returned to his apartment. The storm had finally passed, but the air still tasted like aftermath. He dropped his keys on the counter, glanced at the empty couch, and sat down heavily. The files lay where he'd left them. The truth, his new name, his stolen life, all of it spread out like evidence of a crime that had no solution. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" A pause. Then a whisper. "Ethan." His chest tightened. "Elena?" "I can't stay here," she said. "They're watching the hospitals. Your detective friend came by. I know you didn't pull the trigger, but someone thinks you did. They're coming for you. Elena, tell me where you are. I'll come get you." Another pause, and then, softly, "Do you ever wonder if fate keeps repeating the same mistakes?" "Elena, please." She cut him off. "I found something in my mother's things." A second test. Different results. "Ethan." Her voice trembled. "It says Richard Pierce was your father." The line went dead. Ethan sat frozen, phone still pressed to his ear, heart slamming against his ribs. The world tilted again. If Richard was his father, then what was the real secret? He stared at the documents on the table, the fake DNA test, the signatures, the dates. Some were typed. Others handwritten. And at the bottom of one file, in his father's distinct script, he saw something he hadn't noticed before. If he ever finds out, tell him what he needs to hear. His breath caught. Richard had planned this. The false results. The lies. The setup. But why? And then he saw it, a transfer document dated just 2 weeks ago. Pierce Holdings beneficiary, Elena Monroe Pierce. Everything clicked at once. The affair, the marriage, the secrets, they weren't coincidences. Elena hadn't just been trapped. She'd inherited everything. Ethan stared out the window as Charleston glittered below, beautiful, deceptive, endless. Somewhere in that city, Elena was out there, part lover, part sister, part heir to the empire that had destroyed them both. And now, with Richard dead, one question burned brighter than the sunrise. Was she running from danger? Or running because she was the danger? If this story gripped you, if you felt every twist, every betrayal, every heartbeat, like, comment, and share your thoughts below. Do you think Elena really killed Richard Pierce, or was she framed for something even darker? Maybe the truth isn't buried yet.